dirty money. It's all the dirty money has come in here. Well, no one's profiting right now. They're just laundering money.
All right, everyone, so we are going to go ahead and get this show started for you tonight so we can get you home to dinner. I just want to first start off by introducing myself. My name is Jessica Metzger, for those of you that haven't seen me before. I'm the project planner for this project, and with me on the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program is Mindy Fogg, our supervising planner in long-range planning. And then behind me is our amazing environmental team from AMAC, and we start with Rita Bright, and then Matt Bugart and Taylor Lane. The purpose of this environmental hearing is to provide an overview of the draft program environmental impact report. It's to help answer and clarify questions that you may have, and to receive public comment on the adequacy of the document. If you haven't done so already, to the side of the room here, we have speaker slips, and we'll allow 3 minutes at the end of this presentation for everyone to speak. So make sure to fill one of those out and get it to me and Mindy up here at the front. And also on the back table, we have bookmarks that have the websites for the EIR, and also to sign up for our interested parties list if you haven't done that yet, because there's still many steps in this process. So it's good to be on that list so you're kept in the know on what's going on. Tonight, we ask that you please focus your comments and questions on the environmental impact analysis, mitigation measures that have been presented in the document, alternatives that have been analyzed, and the draft ordinance language. Just to be very clear for everyone, tonight's meeting is not a decision-maker hearing. This is not a planning commission meeting, and this is not a board of supervisors meetings. Those will happen towards the end of this process. Right now, it's just us, the Planning and Development Department, presenting to you the environmental impact report on the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program. This meeting is also really not about the merits or desirability of cannabis in the county or in the state. Once again, those sorts of things can be brought up at the decision-maker hearing, and they are the people that will act and be able to nip and cut what we present to them as they see fit. The proposed EIR is still in draft form, and it's really there for you to get your comments to us on what you think about it. I know a lot of you in the room commented on our scoping document, so this is kind of our teenager version of that, and hopefully in the end of this process we'll have some kind of functioning adult. There will be plenty of additional opportunities to comment on the proposed project. We will be going to the Montecito Planning Commission, and they make a recommendation on the Montecito area to the Board of Supervisors. We will also be going to the County Planning Commission. These meetings will happen in January of 2018. Then we will also be taking those Planning Commission recommendations to the Board of Supervisors for their review and their certification of the document that you're reviewing tonight. And after the Board of Supervisors, if you are in the coastal zone of the county, another layer of review is required at the Coastal Commission level. So there's many more opportunities for you to attend night meetings with us. To start out, for those of you that are new, I apologize for those of you that have been through a lot of these meetings. We like to make sure everyone knows the background of cannabis. And so starting out at the state level, medicinal marijuana was first really allowed through the Compassionate Care Act in 1996. In 2015, regulations were further put in place for medicinal, and then in 2016, in November, the majority of the state of California voters decided to allow recreational cannabis across the state. In June of this year, the governor took both of the laws governing medicinal and recreational and kind of combined them into one hybrid law at the state level. And so that's what we've been looking at to do our first review of regulations. And this was called the SB 94, or Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulations and Safety Act, if you want to get a mouthful in there. The County of Santa Barbara has banned cultivation of medical marijuana since 2016, January of 2016. Recreational cannabis activities have also been prohibited, and a time for us to go through and look at the exact steps that we're doing now, the environmental impacts that any cannabis activities can happen. And we enacted those urgency ordinances in February and March of this year. And also earlier this year, the board appointed an ad hoc subcommittee made up of 2 supervisors who really went and kind of split up the tasks that were needed to complete this on the state-driven timeline that we were given. And so they focused on these main elements: the land use and permitting, which is what we're doing here tonight with you; business licensing, which is taking part in a separate kind of group; enforcement, health impacts, and taxation. This ad hoc subcommittee has been disbanded at this point in time once they gave staff all their various directions for those elements. And before disbandment, between March and September, we held 3 public meetings and 2 scoping meetings. We also have given 2 updates to the Board of Supervisors on the ad hoc's progress thus far. And now I'll hand it over to Mindy.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. We'll also post this presentation to our website in case we go too quickly and you want to look at it again later. But first, a note about the timing of our draft EIR. We issued our notice of preparation on July 12th, and we had a 30-day comment period on that. And we received over 100 comment letters at that time that helped inform the draft EIR. We've published this draft EIR on October 2nd, and therefore that kicked off our 45-day public review period. So comments on this are due by November 16th at 5 p.m. By show of hands, how many of you have had a chance to start looking at the draft EIR? Okay, most of you. Great. Where do you find it? It is available on our website.
Bookmarks.
What's that?
Bookmarks.
Oh, yeah. She brought some bookmarks that have the link to our website, and that's how you can access it. It's also available. It's also available at our zoning counters.
The paper copies of the report are available at our North County Planning Department, and that's on Foster Road, and also at the North County Santa Maria Main Library.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, this slide summarizes the CEQA topics that are analyzed in the draft EIR. We went into detail on nearly all of the CEQA topics that are common, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about which impacts were significant in just a minute here. We developed a project description for the cannabis land use ordinance to look at all of the environmental topics on the previous slide. And the project description is generally based on the state of California licensing program. So the state proposes to issue licenses for activities such as cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, testing, and retail. And those are the types of uses we analyzed. We also looked at a range of different development standards to apply, such as setbacks from schools, permanent fencing and security, and ways to minimize nuisances such as lighting, odor, and noise. The project description is focused on commercial activities rather than personal use. We're very limited on how much we can regulate personal use. However, in Chapter 3, we do explain that personal cultivation would be allowed without a permit, but must be indoors. This table is found on page 2-36 of the draft EIR, and it shows the zones in which the different commercial activities could be permitted under the proposed project. And that's primarily what we use to determine which impacts would be significant. But please keep in mind that the Board of Supervisors will have discretion to do something different from this. So again, this is just our proposal in order to analyze the possible activities that the state licenses. When we looked at all the potential impacts, we did find 4 categories in which the project would have significant and unavoidable impacts. In other words, even with mitigation, these impacts would likely remain significant. The reason that agricultural resources is up there is because we found, or at least we estimate, that a large number of cultivators will want to build new greenhouses, and that can impact areas of prime soils. And then there were a few different impacts to air quality. One is that our current clean air plan, it does not account for this type of industry, including the additional jobs and commutes that it would bring. And then another issue under air quality is potential for objectionable odors. And even though we will be requiring that all permittees prepare an odor abatement plan, we believe there still be instances where sensitive receptors may detect odors that come from commercial cannabis activities. And then the noise impact is related to the traffic impact. So the additional traffic that's expected with this new industry not only would affect traffic congestion and roads, but also the noise that would come from the traffic. On these impacts, I won't go into detail on them, but these are the ones in which we believe the impacts can be mitigated with effective mitigation measures. So please take a look at the mitigation measures that we put in the draft EIR and give us your feedback and input on those. As I'm sure many of you know, CEQA requires us to also analyze project alternatives. It requires a no project alternative as well as a range of alternatives that would substantially lessen environmental impacts. So in the draft EIR, the no project alternative assumes that we would not adopt a permitting and licensing plan, but it also assumes that illegal cannabis activity in the county would continue or expand. Under Alternative 1, we would exclude any cannabis activities in the Ag 1 zone, and therefore that alternative just greatly reduces the overall project area. Alternative 2 is where cannabis cultivation would be precluded from the Williamson Act provisions, and instead it would be considered compatible with Williamson Act areas and crops, but it would be limited on Williamson Act lands to just 22,000 square feet of cultivation for any given Williamson Act contract. And that alternative was derived through our hearings with the Agricultural Preserve Advisory Committee. And finally, the third alternative is called the reduced registrants alternative, and it would impose a cap on the number of licenses and permits that we would issue overall. It's assumed that the cap would be about half of the number of licenses indicated in the registry that we did earlier this year. And so that alternative is very limited, and it's considered the least impactive because it's a small project alternative. And CEQA requires us to also identify one of the alternatives as environmentally superior, so we chose Alternative 3 for that. And lastly, on the EIR, we also, after we circulated the draft EIR, we noticed an error that we wanted to correct. So we've now posted an errata to our website. If you go back to our website, you'll see it posted along with the draft EIR. And basically what it was is the Alternative 3 that I just mentioned on this slide here, Alternative 3, reduced registrants. We left that in two places in the alternatives chapter. We originally weren't planning to analyze that one in detail, so we gave it a short description, and later we decided to analyze it in full. And so it's in two places, so we posted a change to the draft EIR to correct that. And that wraps up my summary of the draft EIR. Jessica will move us on to the next steps here.
So there are many ways to comment on the draft EIR, and remember that our comments are due on November 16th at 5 p.m. So we ask that you speak today if you want to give public comment today, And we also ask that if you speak today, to capture all of the nuances of what you say, you also email that to us or mail it to us. And so the mailing address is up on that screen. And this will be posted, like Mindy said, on our website tomorrow. And also, we ask that you sign up for the update list, which I touched on already, and the bookmarks on the side of the room have these email addresses and update addresses for you to do. Before we get started with the public speaking, we just want to remind everyone that everyone in this room has a vested interest in the county and cares about where we live in our community. And so please be respectful and courteous in your comments. Focus your comments pertaining to the environmental review, like I said before, and focus on productive feedback. Please, no personal attacks or clapping or cheering. That just keeps us here. And for those of you that have been to a couple of hearings, if you really want to make someone feel like you agree with them, this makes no time change for us, so you can wave your hands. We also ask that you make the specific comments within the time limit, so we're going to give every person 3 minutes. There's a little timer up there. We'll speak, make sure to make the microphone really close so we're recording it and they can hear you if someone else is watching afterwards. And it'll show the countdown of your 3 minutes. And then once again, this isn't the forum to talk about the desirability of cannabis in the county, but we urge you to attend the planning commissions and the board of supervisors when this is in its adoption stage, and email them, which you'll get an email from me with those email addresses closer to the hearings, to let them know how you feel about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to call 2 people at a time. And so we'll have 1 person at the mic and 1 on deck, kind of on the side, so we can all get home. And Mindy will call out the names, and I will run the timer. So our first people are...
First is Hunter Jameson, and next will be Renee O'Neill.
Thank you. The draft EIR reviews effects of a widespread county marijuana industry on the natural environment, but neglects harmful effects on individuals, family, and society from increased drug-caused impairment, dependence, and addiction. 2 deficiencies that the final EIR should take into account are effects on law enforcement and on medical care. First, law enforcement. In Colorado, which legalized recreational marijuana in 2013, marijuana-related traffic deaths increased 66% on a 4-year annual average after legalization. The EIR admits black market marijuana will persist and possibly increase after legalization here. Adding in the need to enforce the raft of new laws governing legal marijuana, is it realistic for the EIR to say that there would be no significant impact on law enforcement and that the current Sheriff's Department staffing will be adequate? This needs to be revisited. Second, the EIR says nothing about likely increased emergency room visits and hospitalizations. In Colorado, marijuana-related hospitalizations increased an annual average of 72% after legalization of recreational marijuana. I would also suggest 3 additional changes to the EIR. In addition, in order to increase protection of young people, I suggest the minimum setback outlined on page 2-41 from certain marijuana businesses be increased to 1,000 feet from 600 feet. Also on page 2-41, under retail standards, the land use ordinance needs to forbid on-site consumption at retailers, not allow it. Pot clubs where drivers stagger out to their cars and drive stoned are a menace to society. At the supervisor's marijuana hearing on September 19th, Supervisors Wolf, Hartman, and Adam specifically opposed on-site consumption. Page 3-8 calculates the demand for retail storefronts in Santa Barbara County based on population using storefront and population averages from the cities of Denver and Los Angeles. A more accurate comparison for unincorporated Santa Barbara County, however, would use figures from unincorporated counties. In making that comparison, by the way, one would find that about 60% of all Colorado counties have banned all marijuana businesses, and an even higher percentage of Colorado cities has done so.
Thank you very much.
Renee O'Neill, and then Patricia Hansen.
Good evening. As one of Tepeska's community advocates, I am expressing our community's grave concerns regarding the escalating cannabis crisis in our community. Your document indicates that Tepeska is a relatively remote rural community. The response time for first responders is long. We know that as a fact living out in Tepeska. And as one of the leading community advocates, I'm expressing that Tepeska strongly urges anything the PEIR can do to develop parameters for where this cannabis can be grown within the county. The PEIR constraints, we feel, would be most effective if cannabis was designated to be grown in areas that already have existing agricultural infrastructure. These areas are easily regulated, monitored, taxed, and enforced. If this industry is truly about revenue to the county coffers instead of personal coffers, then produce it where it can be supervised. Another critical point I have, for the health and protection of the clients, this product must be scrupulously monitored. It will be consumed by medical patients and recreational users alike. It is critical for the public to receive a high-quality product, no pun intended, which is free from chemical contamination. I implore this committee and our County Board of Supervisors to be extremely cautious. This is a litigious Pandora's box, just waiting for its turn to open and rear its ugly head. Thank you in advance and for creating the EIR parameters that prohibit this industry in Tepeska Canyon.
So next is Patricia Hansen, and after Patricia, Anita Lang.
I live at the 6-mile marker on Tepeska Canyon. There are around 30 cannabis farms in Tepeska Canyon, and none currently has a permit to operate legally. It's fairly obvious that the growers chose our area for its topography, which offers complete privacy. None of the illegal activity is visible from the main road. The draft environmental impact report clearly states that Tepeska Canyon is unsuitable for growing cannabis. But despite calling the sheriff's attention to the rapidly expanding illegal activity, there's been no enforcement of the law. There is only one way in and one way out, so enforcement could easily be accomplished. But we are told there's no funding available, that their hands are tied. You propose using funds levied on the growers for enforcement purposes, but there's no guarantee that they will apply for permits. They would be subjected to inspections, fees, taxes, and penalties. So what is the incentive? Currently, everything they do is paid for with cash, and none of their income can be tracked. So how will the county make money from them? Please do not grant permits for Tepeska Canyon and deal with what is already there. Our rights as citizens are ignored. We pay our taxes, and we want action. Thank you.
Okay, next is Anita Lang, and after Anita, Rory O'Reilly.
Hi, my name is Anita Lang, and I've been out in Tepeska Canyon for 41 years. I'm here today in support of the Tepesca Canyon Crisis Committee. They oppose the commercial cannabis in that area. It says the PAR does not adequately address safety of the canyon residents. I know for a fact there's been a couple of times when people have gone into their driveways at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not safety for anyone involved. In fact, it winks at the existence of illegal grows. It does nothing to help our situation. And the growers continually to build bigger and bigger. They're doing it right now when they're supposed to be banned from doing anything. I want to remind you that what was stated in Proposition 64, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, says we'll legalize marijuana for those over 21, protect children, and establish laws to regulate marijuana cultivation, distribution, sale, and use, and will protect Californians and the environment from potential damages. I don't see any of this in the PEIR. Thank you.
Next, Rory O'Reilly, and after Rory, Mike Butler.
Hello, my name is Rory O'Reilly. I own a parcel on Blazing Saddle Road. My small cabin burned down during the Alamo fire, so I'm very aware of the concern about the fire risks in Tepesca Canyon. Marijuana farming will only add to these risks. The fire that started in the Cuyama Valley was traced to marijuana growers. There are not adequate roads in Tepesca, only one road out of the canyon. There's not adequate water. The growers are now trucking in water. There's especially inadequate funding for law enforcement. All the growers in the canyon are illegal now, with no enforcement. I am very leery of investing in rebuilding at my property now due to all this illegal activity. And on top of that, all the views now have been impacted by all the plastic hoop structures. Thank you.
Next, Mike Butler, and then Susan Butler.
My name is Mike Butler. I've called Tepesca my home for the past 30 years. Lindy Dowd, a San Luis resident, facing the same issues we face, made these points. Tepesca has only one water basin because of its limited water supply, isolation, and number of illegal pot grows, the sensitivity of the habitat, and the number of endangered species. The whole Tepesca planning area must remain off limits to all cannabis activity. I see what's happening in Tepesca due to the lack of cannabis regulations. I always thought legalizing was a no-brainer, but this is a real reality check. This is not just peace, love, and a pot plant in the backyard. This is big business riddled with outside interests looking for weak regulations, weak resource protection, and has the potential to utterly transform our county and our way of lives. What I've witnessed in Tepesca is a gold rush, a Wild West, lawless mentality without existing law enforcement to contain it. It showed me there will always be a black market, no matter how many permits you issue. Go slow. Don't open the floodgates. I understand the pressure you face by those chomping at the bits to get in on this money-making industry. How do we accommodate this monumental challenge and still retain the character and quality of life in Tepesca? Today we have the advantage of living in a civil society where we can take a moment and consider the ramifications before we act. Please consider the well-being of your constituents before promise of an economic gold rush. And one other quick thing, that we've had multiple power outages since the marijuana grows. And according to PG&E, when we called on the last one, that one was caused by the grow right above our house. So and if you could hear the noise when all the generators started kicking in our canyon. So please consider that, the impact on our electric grid as well, please. Thank you.
Power's out right now in Tepesca.
Susan Butler, and then Derek McLeese.
Let's talk about cannabis and fire. In the 50 years I have lived in Tepiscate, we have had many, many wildfires. Twice my family and I have been evacuated from our homes. The Alamo fire burned up to the doors on both of our residences, causing thousands and thousands worth of damage. Believe me when I say fire is our worst nightmare. Tepiscate Canyon is a 15.8-mile-long paved 2-lane road. It has limited line of sight and substandard road width. It has one way in and one way out. It has steep canyon walls and thick vegetation. Basically, it's a fire trap. According to PEIR findings 372, existing cannabis operations can be associated with fires, highly flammable materials, and on occasion, explosions. PEIR findings HAZ4 states cannabis activities in remote areas could increase difficulty with emergency evacuations, particularly those with narrow rural roads and limited access, such as Tepiscate Canyon. Further cannabis activities could introduce new ignition sources to rural areas, including electrical power, machinery, operators, and employees, increasing the potential for accidental wildfire ignition. Any mitigation the county takes to allow cannabis activity in Tepiscate must require that the cannabis growers that are creating the problem incur the cost of, 1, putting in a new fire station at the summit, which would protect the community and reduce response time, and 2, make significant improvements to Tepiscate Road, which is steep, narrow, and has blind turns. Tepiscate residents already know about fire. We've seen it, we've lived it, we fear it. The peer findings state it clearly. Cannabis growing is a fire hazard. Protect the citizens who rely on your good judgment. Say no to cannabis in Tepiscate Canyon.
Derek McLeese, and then Linda Tunnell.
Good evening. I don't have any drafted response, but I will send an email with my response. However, I think one of the things that really needs to be discussed here is that even though cannabis growing is banned in both from medical and recreational usage, I just left Sabata Canyon, and I'm telling you, the skunk smell there is so bad. That's why I'm wearing this skunk mask. The green skunk smell is the worst thing you can get. I mean, you can't even live through that stuff, and it's there all the time. I grow wine. If I have a 3-mile-an-hour wind, I can't spray organic soap on my grapes. But these guys blow that stuff all over us. The water table. We're in Sabata Canyon. Everything Tepiscate Canyon said is exactly the same for Sabata Canyon. We have one way in, one way out. We have 8 illegal growers already. I've done a flyby. The plants are all over the place. They're outside. They're inside. And guess what? There's not a permit out there that it's really operating as a permit. You call and say, there's no permits out there, but they do it under tomato and chrysanthemums permits. Now, they're lying. They're lying to you now, and they're going to lie to you in the future. They lie to you all the time. They're growing medical marijuana, and they're saying, I was there before January 16th. But they weren't. They didn't even buy the property before that. And all the money that's coming in is dirty, filthy drug money. It's being laundered, buying leases, buying property, paying $30 an hour to people to work. The environmental impact of this dirty money on our little canyon is unbelievable. Thank you very much.
Next, Linda Tunnell, and then Dave Clary.
My name is Linda Tunnell. My family's been in Tepiscate, we're newbies, for only 42 years. What you've heard from the friends and neighbors is just the small amount that we've gleaned from your 608-page document that we've only had 2 weeks to look at. So we're going to have plenty more. We, at this point, recommend alternate 1. Not only does it remove Tepiscate Canyon from the project area of eligibility, but other sensitive areas of Santa Barbara County, as in the Santa Ynez, Los Olivos, Buellton, and Mission Hills regions of Lompoc. As per your EIR document, these mountainous areas, such as Tepiscate Canyon in the Santa Maria region, and Mission Canyon in the South Coast region, where roads can be lightly maintained, subject to erosion, or wash out from storms, may have limited line of sight, substandard road width, or geometrics for turning movements be of poor or failing condition. These areas are not conducive to high-traffic commercial cannabis grows. Any area in Santa Barbara County that fall under these conditions should be removed from the project area of eligibility. Many of these back rural roads cannot be mitigated. You cannot widen them or straighten them. And the more traffic you put on the road will result in a death, especially when the non-residents drive the road like they were the only ones on it. Many of our neighbors have had close calls due to increased traffic. I would also like to bring up for the record questions we have regarding revenues and enforcement, which we hope will be addressed and answered. How will the permit license fee revenues be handled? Will they be deposited in the county general fund? Will they be deposited in the dedicated enforcement fund? How many new enforcement agents will be needed, and when will they be hired? Will they have the authority to enter property to assess compliance? Will they respond to complaints only? Thank you. I look forward to submitting more in writing. Thank you.
Okay, Dave Clary, followed by Tim Bennett.
My name's Dave Clary. I live in Tepescay Canyon. I see structural problems with the draft program EIR. One map, figure 3.8-1, and I hope that people can see this, I'm not sure. This one purports to be the watersheds in Santa Barbara County. Well, it's hard for you to see from here, but it's up here it shows where we are. We're included in the Sisquoc Santa Maria watershed. Only our Tepescay Canyon watershed is so different from the rest, it makes no sense to include it. The next map in your draft EIR, which is figure 2.2-1, it shows your cannabis regions, and it has Tepescay Canyon divided, part in one, part in the other. We have virtually nothing in common with the rest of those regions. So we're getting kind of lost in the shuffle. 4.4-1, which it shows, this is alternative 1, where you have part of Tepescay Canyon as Ag 1, no commercial growing. That's a great start. However, we finally feel it's time for us to tell you what we think Tepescay Canyon consists of, and we're not going away. This is alternative 1 and an expanded part of it, because this is what we consider to be Tepescay Canyon. It borders on the National Forest to the east. It borders on 166 to the north. It borders on Santa Maria Mesa Road to the south, and it extends, this is still kind of amorphous, to the extent of the feeder roads that come into Tepescay Canyon for ingress and egress to the west. So we want you to look at this. We're not going away. This is Tepescay Canyon. And let's see. Okay. This map is a preliminary draft. We'll supply a more accurate one when we have more time to work on it. This would include Ag 1 and Ag 2 parcels. It may break uniformity in zoning, but you have statutory language in SB 94 allowing you to set boundaries for cannabis cultivation however you see it or however the board sees it. There is no rational basis for excluding commercial cannabis activities from the mountainous zones in South County and writing us off as a perpetual illegal growth site in Tepescay Canyon. Thank you.
Tim Bennett is next, followed by Little Clary.
Sorry, just really quick.
I guess I'm special.
No.
No. Yeah, thanks. My name's Tim Bennett. I live on Blazing Saddle Drive. That's as high as you can get on Tepescay Road before you go over the other side. I've been up there since 2001. I don't have any problem with marijuana grows or cannabis or use or grows or anything else, but it's just unsafe to bring that kind of equipment onto our road. It's too small, it's too narrow. They're bringing semi-trucks up, equipment, tractors, bulldozers, water trucks all day long, back and forth. Somebody's going to get hurt or killed. It's just simply the road is too narrow. too blind, and it should be taken off of this, even thought of being used for that, because it's not set up for that. If you want to build us a nice wide road with lines in the middle where there's plenty of, space to get commercial vehicles into a residential zone, fine. But it's just not functional. It's not safe, and it shouldn't be allowed. Excuse me. So I've already had multiple close calls with my car, had to ditch it on the shoulder, having trucks come around in the middle of the road. Semi-truck trailers so big, they're not even allowed on that road, but they still go. It's nuts how unsafe it is to get that kind of equipment, and it's just going to get worse. I mean, at some point they have to harvest, they have to haul stuff in and out. It's, past, present, and future, it doesn't look good. Okay, so that's what I have to say. It's extremely unsafe.
Lil Clary, followed by Carmen Castro.
Lil Clary. I'm a member of the Tepesquay Canyon Crisis Committee. We oppose commercial marijuana operations in Tepesquay Canyon, our community. I'm astounded at the recommendations of this EIR, 608 pages of, frankly, competent description and analysis, yet the conclusion is, let's just limit the number of permits. Further, I find it especially disturbing that the recommendation is based on presumed inability to control illegal operations, and I'm quoting from the document. Unregulated cannabis activities currently exist and are likely to exist, and there will be significant and unavoidable effects on the environment due to the difficulty of effectively enforcing and regulating such unlicensed operations. So here's the message I'm getting. We residents of Tepesquay Canyon are being thrown under the bus. We will just have to continue to live with the 30-some illegal grows in our canyon. Please note, in terms of the income expected from taxation, the residents of Tepesquay Canyon are real taxpayers, not fantasy. Somewhere in the future we'll get some money from these guys. In 20 years in Tepesquay, I estimate that my husband and I have paid over $80,000 in taxes to the county. And I would be willing to bet that this amount exceeds, probably by about $80,000, the amount paid by the current illegal growers. Have any of our tax dollars gone for enforcement, whether through the zoning process or law enforcement? Not as far as I can tell, because despite the county-wide moratorium, I can see 3 new grows from our home, including one established since the Alamo fire in July. Let me finish by saying we hear over and over from grower advocates about the percentage vote for cannabis in Proposition 64. Don't kid yourselves. The voters of the state voted to decriminalize marijuana possession and use. They did not vote to support unrestricted criminal activities associated with the cannabis revolution, which will be accepted as collateral damage under this PIR. Thank you.
Carmen Castro, followed by David Castro.
Hello. My name is Carmen Castro, and I've lived in Tepesquay Canyon and owned my home for 37 years. I'm here supporting the Tepesquay Committee, Crisis Committee, I will state, which totally opposes commercial marijuana operations in our community. The peer states that Tepesquay has a sensitive natural community of oakwoods, grasslands, sage scrub, chaparral, riparian woodland habitats, and Tepesquay Creek, along Tepesquay Creek. My property is involved with Tepesquay Creek. It cuts it right into a triangle. Specifically, I'm referring to BIO 1, 2, and 3. It does create adverse effect on our unique and rare endangered plants and wildlife, and I personally have experienced that. Depending on where future cannabis activity sites do occur, and does occur now, it could result in the loss of healthy native grasslands, oak woodlands, and forests. We have already observed illegal grading in the existing groves in the canyon. Hoop houses need a lot of flat space, Our canyon is extremely steep with few natural occurring level spots. Clearly, the growers don't care about our sensitive natural community. My personal, and you may smile at this, is I wanted to again create a pond at the creek for my children. I was immediately warned by Fish and Game and Wildlife for creating a pond that was, they said, illegal because the creek was defined as a sensitive endangered species for the salamander habitat. Now that may make you smile, but I believe, and my family and the residents of Tepesquay are an endangered species if we allow the cannabis growers to continue. We oppose marijuana operations in our community. Thank you.
David Castro, followed by John Truer.
Okay, that was my wife of 3 years. We're celebrating 3 years tomorrow. I'm familiar with what's going on over there, but I'm new to this. 4 years or so that I was introduced. It was tranquil canyon, not a lot of problems. We have one rumor that there was one grower up on top of the hill. Still, they were residents willing to tolerate it. We did report it. Nothing was done. Law enforcement is not enforcing it. Consequently, now the activity has doubled or tripled. My impact on that growth, my wife's property, the well went dry shortly after all that activity. Had to pay at least $500 a month for about 7 months to get water trucked up to her property. She survived 37 years over there without losing any water until this activity. It's obvious that made the difference. Well went dry. Then the pump burned out because no water to pump. It cost us another $2,000 to put a new pump in. Shortly after the rain, we had the rain, and all of a sudden we've got water again. But the overuse, those people dried up the well of my wife's and neighbors, several neighbors that were in the same condition. I got a response from somebody in San Luis Obispo, supervisor there, discussing this for recommendation, dig a deeper well. No, we can't do that. None of these people can do that, expensive as it is. However, I observed several drilling people going up the hill. Now, less people can afford it, obviously. They have deep pockets. We don't. We won't be. Most of these people are fixed income, retired. They are impacting the quality of life on our area there. Besides what my wife mentioned about the endangered species there, and I agree, they are the endangered species there. If we don't put a stop to it, we can't permit it, and they don't fit the parameters now that are already in place. And they're doing this illegally now. No enforcement. That's the big. The infrastructure doesn't support it. Big trucks going up and down there. We can tell the residents, the locals, when they drive the road, they have their lights on. They'll wave to you. I see characters racing up and down that street. I know they don't live there. They faster than the road permits. I'm many times have to move over to let them by, and the road doesn't permit that either. There's very few areas that you can move over to let the tailgaters pass you. The big trucks are going to tear up the road. Who's going to pay for that? The taxpayer. That's nowhere near. The impact is going to be worse than the revenue that might generate from this if it were legal.
Thank you very much.
John Trier, and then Robert Fedor.
Good evening. My name is John Truer. I've been a drug and alcohol counselor here in Santa Maria for the last 20 years. I am a resident of the Cuyama Valley. I've lived in the Cuyama area for 12, 13 years. And I see that the whole West Coast is now producing some kind of marijuana. We got Alaska and Washington and Oregon, California, Arizona. And isn't it about time we got over this reefer madness idea? Listen, I'd like to speak about odor. I lived in eastern Los Angeles for about 10 years. I lived on a dairy farm. I would come home from school, and all the kids would go, pew, ooh. And you know what I would think? That's home, because you look out my window, and there's the Holsteins there. We have a dairy farm in the Cuyama Valley that has 1,700 Holsteins. And boy, do they poop. But you know what they do with the poop? They make fertilizer and fertilize the earth with it for vegetables to grow. You know, there was a proposal to get this Foster Farms, because I don't know if you've ever been around a chicken farm, but chickens, well, hope you never get around a turkey farm, because if you're downwind from a turkey farm, you know, you're just either going to have to live with it or move. But odor, even broccoli, after its harvest, they leave the veg matter to rot, to plow under for the nitrogen to make more food grow. So I don't know. I guess if, you know, skunks, if you go down the highway 166 and there's a dead skunk, you're going to go pew. But you're going to keep on going because that's part of nature. You know? Another thing, enforcement. Where is this money going to come to? Haven't we put enough people in jails and prisons because of marijuana? I mean, I would hope that this reefer madness thing is over. We finally matured enough as adults to see that it's not like that original movie was with maniacs killing and God knows what. That was a propaganda film. Let's move forward on this. The whole West Coast is, yes, going green, folks. Yeah, I know that there is a fire hazard, of course, and we've seen fires for various reasons and stuff. Let's keep this in proportion here. We've had fires in the Cuyama area, you know, and that is horrific. But, you know, we look up Northern California with the Napa. We know Napa, Sonoma, and Mendocino is the golden triangle for marijuana. And I have yet to hear that that was the responsibility for these fires.
Thank you very much, sir. That's your time.
I got more, but thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Of course. Next is Robert Fedor and then Steve Juak, and that's my last public comment slip, so if there's any more out there, please bring them up. Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay. I'm Robert Fedor. I'm a board member of the Cannabis Business Council of Santa Barbara County. I've got a few notes here. Odor can be mitigated, and we want strong odor controls. Odor does not degrade air quality. Traffic impacts are overestimated. Existing jobs have already had some impact, but small vehicles are used for transportation, and citing more industrial opportunities, such as testing in the county, will mitigate some anticipated traffic concerns. The industry has a significant positive impact on jobs. Not everybody's in the black market. I have one of the legal original collectives in Los Angeles. I'm a union employer. The largest union in America is the United Commercial and Food Workers Union. It's 1.3 million members. Local 770 has 40,000 jobs in Los Angeles, Ventura, and Santa Barbara County. And I'm a union employer. I signed a collective bargaining agreement with them in 2012. The EIR talks about the black market, but more regulation and more legal licenses will significantly reduce these impacts. CEQA also favors agriculture as a use. Ag lands are zoned ag for current and future production for a reason. They're prime lands for all ag commodities, and our economy is dependent on ag. Also, water impacts are less than for many traditional ag crops, and it's well regulated through water districts. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Steve, you're our last speaker.
Thank you very much for seeking comments on the draft EIR tonight. I'd like to talk about two different issues with the draft EIR. First of all, accuracy of the cannabis registry information that you've received, and also a subset of Ag 1 parcels, namely neighborhoods that are called EDRNs, existing developed rural neighborhoods. I think if you direct some attention to the cannabis registry, you'll find that many of the responders stretch the truth, hoping to get legal non-conforming status even if they will not qualify for that status once the facts are examined. In January of 2016, in our general neighborhood of Sabata Canyon, only 10% of the growers had any cannabis plants in the areas that they are now using. These are all illegal grow sites, as you've heard. In our immediate neighborhood, 3 of our neighbors signed contracts with out-of-town growers during the summer of 2017, and their lessees started developing vacant land at that time. None of these operations will qualify for legal nonconforming status if the county pursues even a minimum amount of due diligence when land use permits are issued. Unfortunately, the authors of the draft EIR have made the assumption that the information provided by the registry is accurate and truthful. This is certainly not the case in Sabata Canyon. Accurately predicting potential environmental impacts and effects without accurate information is very difficult, and I think that an effort should be made to document the information that has been provided to you. Otherwise, the value and accuracy of the final EIR will suffer greatly. This information will have to be verified at some point. Why not do it now so that the final EIR will be more accurate? Getting more accurate information on the truthfulness of the registry responses may dramatically increase the environmental desirability of alternative number 1, especially if you focus on, as I mentioned, existing developed rural neighborhoods, otherwise known as EDRNs, which all have Ag 1 zoning at this point. Originally they didn't, but they've all been standardized under that zoning now. These are residential neighborhoods that typically didn't have any commercial ag operations before illegal cannabis growers moved into the area. Prohibiting cannabis cultivation in EDRNs would solve many of the neighborhood problems that have already emerged in the Santa Maria and Lompoc valleys, such as those reported tonight in Tepesquei and Sabata Canyon. Similar problems will certainly develop if cannabis cultivation is allowed in similar neighborhoods of the Santa Ynez Valley. Commercial cannabis cultivation is not compatible with the rural residential neighborhoods found in EDRNs and should only be allowed on remote Ag 2 parcels where surrounding residents can be adequately protected from the objectionable odors associated with dense grows and where neighborhood safety and quality of life are less likely to be compromised.
Thank you, Steve. That's your time.
Thank you.
Mindy, can you change the slide to the last one? So with no other speaker slips, that is our presentation. Thank you all for coming to our meeting tonight and expressing your concerns. And we will definitely be reviewing them when we review the final draft of the EIR. Up on the board before you are some upcoming dates to keep in mind that will also be noticed to our email list. There is one more that's not up there in December. I can't remember who talked about the enforcement portion of cannabis, but we are bringing that to the Board of Supervisors as a separate item because it doesn't really quite fit with this, and that will be December 5th. So that will be at the Board of Supervisors hearing December 5th. So look for an email as that gets closer on more information, including the staff reports on that. And thank you very much. We'll be around for questions if you have anything, but we do have to leave the room by 6:45. So if you need to hold private conversations, please do it outside. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's giving us the opportunity to speak to you.